We got Brandon Stubbs, Steve Gallegos Gordie Tamayo here with TheTitleFight.com. Action-packed weekend that took place here. We'll just jump right into it. Brandon, you want to give me a little bit of your take on some of the hype leading up to the fight, day of the fight, and kind of what we got to see last night with Broner Malignaggi?
You know, my biggest fear with the fight was that Paulie was going to let his emotions get the best of him and not go on with the game plan and just try to go in there and slug it out and try to, be a big puncher, which he's not capable of doing against Broner. With all the verbiage that went back and forth, it just seemed like it was genuine bad blood. He went out there and he executed a game plan. He used his movement, tried to keep his distance, tried to work off the jab. But just unfortunately, he just did not have enough punching cards to really do significant damage. But, he made it a close competitive fight to where I could see it could have been a draw or, whoever won winning by a round or two. It was a very competitive and entertaining fight.
Yeah, no, I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was closer than what, one of the judges had on the scorecards there. Broner obviously felt that he just pretty much had his will, which he was walking Paulie down the whole time. So, he wasn't affected by his power whatsoever. Steve, was there anything that you think maybe Paulie could have done to kind of change the tempo of that fight, or was he pretty much doing all he could have done?
Basically, he did everything that he could have done in that fight. He didn't have the punching power. The difference in power was evident. Paulie just went out there, did the best he could, threw a lot of punches. You stuck to his game plan, used movement, and basically fought the only fight that he could have fought. And I thought if I would have scored a fight, I would have scored that more one-sidedly, such as the judges scored a 117-109. I just felt that Paulie had no snap on his punches, and Broner, didn't have to do as much in those rounds to win them because when Broner hit, he hurt. And being the fact that Malignaggi wasn't able to back Broner up was another key in the fight. I thought Broner really dominated the fight. Basically with his punching power. Broner toyed with him pretty much the whole night. He knew that Paulie couldn't hurt him, so he didn't have to do as much in this fight. And he eked out what I thought was an easy decision.
So, Brendan, do you think that he did enough to actually make a statement coming up 2 weight classes here? Or, is there still some question marks lingering about, Broner and his skill set and him being dubbed as, the next guy that's going to take on the torch here once Mayweather decides to hang him up?
I think it did, raise more questions because, there was a power differential there between him and Paulie, but he also really never had Paulie genuinely rocked and damaged to where we were like, okay, he's going to get Paulie out of here. So there's a question if that power really did follow him up those 2 weight classes. Something else, Jim Gray had said to him that, after the fight that when he was sitting and talking to Floyd Mayweather in between the rounds, Floyd had pointed out that he thought Broner was a little bit flat-footed out there, something that Broner has had a tendency to do in his fights. At 147, where there's a lot of athletic guys, that flat-footedness is going to come back and bite him. So there's a lot more questions now to be raised. I think the main thing is going to be the power. Has that really went up with him in a weight class? Going up the 2 divisions. The skill set wise, the tools are there, but does he know always how to put them completely together to end a fight against a top class guy? To this point, really beyond Ponce de Leon, you can say probably is the biggest competition he's had since he's turned pro.
And the way that this guy's being marketed, he I don't even know how to put this nicely, but he's obviously rubbed a lot of people the wrong way in the way that his personality comes out, his persona. Is Broner taking on too much of this role and trying to become the next most hated guy on the planet in the sports realm? Or, is this some tactical marketing to get, haters to hate him and want to watch him even more, similar to what, Floyd did back in his early days? What do you think about that, Brennan?
I saw a tweet out from New Developing. They said, people will watch Broner lose, that's good business. The problem is Broner's not really, he's rubbing people maybe in an extreme way, not the same way that Floyd Mayweather once did, to where people really don't want to see him. Like, he really doesn't have his own fan base that would travel to watch him go fight. He's not still that big of a name to where the casual fans will, pay to watch him lose, because he just comes off so arrogant, so conceited. It's like, yeah, I'll watch him on free TV. So it's a weird spot he's in. It's a really weird spot. I mean, they're marketing him in that angle, but will fans and casual fans, the ones who actually have the expendable income, will they pay to watch him lose? Will they travel to go watch him fight? And I got to say, right now, that's a no. Mm-hmm. He's got to be matched up with another big name in a bout to really make people travel and want to spend that money and help build that fan base for him.
And Steve and I had our rounds last night. He was telling me that he had a kind of a soft spot in the sense for Broner's style and flash, and that kind of captured his attention there. But Steve, what is it that catches your attention the most about Broner, and what is it that you like about him as being one of the name marquee fighters that's going to be carrying the sport forward?
Basically, his style, his overall skill set. He is very gifted in terms of his speed and his skill. His boxing IQ is probably a lot higher than most other fighters. Just because he didn't look good against Paulie doesn't mean that he's going to fight that way all the time. Got to remember, Paulie has a very good chin. He's taken hard shots from a lot of other fighters in the past and has never been stopped. So you got to take that into consideration. In fact, the styles make fights. Broner's not always going to go out there and stand flat-footed, and toy with his opponents. There's going to be times where he's going to, really take an opponent seriously and go out there and dominate. Even Floyd had his share of bad nights early in his career, against fighters like DeMarcus Chop Chop Corley and Emmanuel Burton. So, it's still kind of a work in progress, but I still, believe that Broner is the heir to Floyd's pound-for-pound crown, and, he will be headlining, his own pay-per-view cards somewhere in the future. I really still do believe that.
Well, he's obviously got the team behind him pushing for that and make sure it actually happens there, with Heyman, with Golden Boy, now Showtime. First person he thanked was Heyman for the 18-karat grill that he had. So he's obviously got some people behind him that are very influential, which brings up another point. Paulie almost put his foot in his mouth, known as a talker, maybe was talking a little bit too much with Jim Gray post-fight interview. He, kind of insinuated in some sense that the fight was fixed, and that started floating around Twitter. Brandon, what was your take on that? Was he just a little bit too emotional and caught up on the heat of the moment at the time, or what was your take on that?
The week before the fight, during the media call, he actually made a comment saying, if it's a close decision, don't be surprised if I get screwed because I'm going against an Al Heyman fighter. So this is something he had already laid that seed and planted that a week going into the fight, which when he said that on the call, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. But he was vocal about that and said that at that point, when he went on his post-fight rant, I can't say I don't disagree with what he said. I thought the 117, 111 was a little bit high. Okay, I can kind of see his point there, but he's got to be easy with that because he does have a great career having doing commentating, whether it be for Showtime or someone else. But when you say that you're that critical, you got to be careful because Golden Boy and Al Heyman pretty much are in each other's pocket right now, being that a bulk and a vast majority of the fighters with Golden Boy and Al Heyman fighters, you're going to be commentating those same fighters. Are you going to use that platform on Showtime in the future to further bash Al Heyman and Al Heyman fighters? So it's a slippery slope he's on that. It'll be interesting to see if he kind of recants or retracts any of those statements and those lines here in the coming weeks, following the fight. But Paulie's Paulie. I mean, to his credit, wears his heart on his sleeve. He's going to speak his mind. I think in that case, it might have been bad timing.
What's on the horizon here for Broner? He threw out there after hearing some of the boos and hearing some of the commentary that all of his fighters are handpicked for him, because that's obviously been a hot topic out there. Steve, who do you see this guy taking on next? I mean, he's supposed to be the heir to the throne here. He needs to be stepping up in competition, obviously, if that's the case, I believe. Preferably put him in against a boxer puncher. He has, faced some pretty soft-handed opponents, arguably, leading up to this point. Paulie, no different. What's next for him?
I'm surprised that he made the jump to 147, being that there's so much competition at 140 pounds. A lot of great matchups at 140 that can be made still. Maybe a fight with Lucas Matisse would be in the works. A fight with Danny Swift Garcia would be phenomenal, being that he's a boxer puncher, way styles match up. That could be a very competitive fight, and a fight that either fighter can win. So I think he should test the waters at 140, because at 147, who is really there to give him a true challenge? Floyd Mayweather and him have agreed that they're never going to fight each other, because he says Floyd's his bigger brother. Devin Alexander, who wants to see that fight? So I think he should move down in weight, to 140, get some of the marquee matchups there. And be great for boxing. It can end up silencing some of his critics, because the top fighters in those divisions are at 140.
Post-fight commentary, Richard Schaefer was heard to go on the record at the post-fight conference that Maidana would be a great opponent for him, so that's already been circulating out there. Steve, you got the chance to question Broner about Maidana, and I was really intrigued with what he said. He's like, Maidana is Maidana. Everybody knows what he brings to the table. He packs a punch. Pretty one-dimensional fighter, though. Brandon, do you think that would be a competitive fight at all for Broner, or you think he would just pick Maidana apart as he stands in front of him?
He would more than likely pick Maidana apart, but the thing is, he has more of a punching power. Paulie kind of set out a blueprint in many ways that you can actually attack and fight Adrian Broner here at 147. So if Maidana can take some of that in what he saw, work off the jab, he has a chance because he does have power in his hands. Paulie was able to touch Broner in the face. The thing is, with Paulie having the punching power, you really didn't see any effects on Broner's face. So against a heavier-handed guy, could that be a competitive fight? Absolutely. Another name that was thrown out on here has actually been Keith Thurman, which I thought was a little bit strange, but again, that kind of makes sense. He's a boxer puncher, has a little bit of power behind him. Could be an interesting fight there at 147, but if Broner really is going to let the fans vote, it's going to be interesting to see how they vote, but I say more than likely what you're going to see next is either going to be Devin Alexander if he wins, or Amir Khan, one of those two, or, sad as this may sound, Shane Mosley will more than likely be the next opponent. Just kind of got a weird feeling. There's going to be no voting. It's going to be Al Heyman's doing, and it's going to be one of those guys.
Yeah. I hope it's not Mosley, no knock on Mosley or anything like that, but this guy's young and on the come up here. Rather than packing his resume with a name on there, I'd like to see him against somebody that can test the waters with him, which Matisse packs a punch. We've gotten to see a little bit of his boxing ability. I think he's very underrated as a boxer as well, and would like to see him in there with him, but don't know if they're going to be ready and willing to throw him in there, although they do share the same management. Heyman's now managing Matisse as well, right?
Yes, he is. He's also isn't Heyman behind Danny Garcia as well?
Yeah, see?
It's one of those things that you're going to start seeing a lot more, unfortunately, for Golden Boy, which could come back and bite him in the behind, is you're going to have fighter versus fighter out of the Al Heyman camp, because that's all that's there. So, those matchups are going to start coming more frequent as time goes on.
One of the other fights on the card here that I wanted to touch base on as well, what was being hyped as the next great American heavyweight, in Seth Mitchell, suffered his first career loss and somewhat of a shocker to some people, against Jonathan Banks. And this was supposed to be the rematch to either, one, silence some of the critics and show it wasn't a fluke, or vice versa. And we didn't get to see too much action with this fight here. Steve, what was your take on Jonathan Banks coming in here, having an opportunity to close the show early on in the fight, and for one reason or another just not pulling the trigger and getting the job done?
That was his fight to win or lose, and I think it's not what Mitchell did, it's what Banks didn't do. Banks, was obviously was a lot more smarter of a fighter than Mitchell. Obviously has a better boxing pedigree than Mitchell. When he hit him, he hurt him. There were two opportunities in that fight to put Seth Mitchell away, and he didn't do it. And also I don't think he was expecting, Seth Mitchell to come out and try to outbox him. He was expecting Mitchell to come forward and try to take him out like he did in the first fight and just play right into his hands. But Seth Mitchell actually worked on his boxing, used his jab more, kept his distance, and boxed his way to an easy decision. I think it betters Seth Mitchell in the long run in his career because, in order to be successful, he's got to have them tools. He's got to box. He's got to, use that jab in order to have a long career. So, whether you thought the fight was boring or exciting, it's definitely good for Seth Mitchell in the long run.
What's next for Seth Mitchell, Brennan, here? I mean, this guy got his belts back. Whether or not he silenced some critics about a questionable chin and whether he can hang with some of the big dogs, I think that's still out there lingering. Credit to Mitchell, like Steve said, he did stick to his game plan. I mean, he wasn't going in there to knock the guy's head off. He came in here to box. He weathered an early storm, and whether or not he had Banks hesitant to pull the trigger on it because he feared maybe him coming through with the heavy shot or whatever it was, he did stick to his game plan. What's next for Mitchell?
I mean, more than likely it's going to be a showdown with one of the other American heavyweights, which kind of would make the most sense. There's no point in throwing him in there yet with the Tyson Fury, with the Price, with Klitschko yet, or a Belkin. He's nowhere near close to those guys, and it may just kind of come down to just being an elimination amongst the American heavyweights before they get one of those European fighters for a big fight. I mean, there's Jennings out there, who just came off of a win. You have Stavron. You still have Ariola out there. You have Deontay Wilder, who's out there. So it'll more likely be one of those guys, and it's just going to kind of be they're going to be fighting each other, one by one, to kind of eliminate and see who is the best American heavyweight. And right now, Banks is out of that equation. It's Mitchell who's now in that slot.
I was really excited about the fight yesterday. I think the build-up to the fight, the anticipation of the fight was great. I think at times it did get a little bit out of hand and took the focus off the actual fight and boxing itself and more on personal jabs and Jessica and all kinds of other things. Speaking of that, Broner had to get the last word, and it seemed there. If you guys heard the end of the post-fight interview there where he said he walked away with both Paulie's belt and his girl, and that sent Paulie off on a loose end as well there. Do you think that, Brian, just capping off with this here with Broner, he intrigues me, believe it or not. This guy, do you think it's all staged for him? It's all hype, or is this Broner? Is this the guy that's supposed to be taking over boxing?
I'm starting to really wonder if this is just part of his personality, and if that's the case, that's going to be a major turnoff. Mm-hmm. He's not going to be able to get large sponsorships, endorsements with that kind of attitude, that kind of bravado about him. Another thing that really upset people on Twitter that I noticed last night during the fight was, they showed behind the scenes him going back home to Cincinnati and his mother living in the house that he was raised in still, and it was just looked like they were still kind of on a poverty level, and then he's bragging about, throwing out money and spending money and doing all this other stuff, but, when people saw that, they were like, okay, this is how you treat your family. So, he's really going to have to change some things. He's going to need to get some actual proper handlers in place, kind of the same way that Floyd did as time went on. He got handlers in place to kind of curb some of that and actually mature as a person. And as he matures as a person, mature even more as a fighter, is going to make him even more marketable, similar to what Floyd Mayweather's doing now. So he's really got to look at that. He's got to take a step back and say, if I want to be that megastar on the next level, I'm going to have to change some things with me personally. Until he does that, I think he's going to have more detractors than supporters, just because off of his attitude and the way he carries himself is just such a turnoff to so many boxing fans and even casual boxing fans. They find it to be such a turnoff to where they just want no part of it.
Gotcha. Great with you there. Well, always great chopping it up with my partners here at TheTitleFight.com, Brandon Stubbs, Steve Gallegos, and Gordie Tamayo signing off. Thanks for tuning in.